Hi there, Chris. You've been using the Active anchor on your, I think it's a 37-foot single hull yacht.
Well, it's a 36-foot Roberts. The vessel itself is a 6.5, 7-ton boat. I've just had it for about 20 years, and all that time the anchor I've had on was a CQR anchor. I think it's around a 45 pound anchor.
Around 20 kilos, that makes it
kilos,
probably.
yeah, somewhere in that range. And while I've had a few, I call them boating moments using anchors, I've certainly had a few with the CQR where sometimes it's let go, and that was me also learning and perfecting or getting better at how to anchor. But certainly each time I used the anchor with the CQR, I learnt the hard way, as you always do with sailing, that to use plenty of cable and bedded anchor, set the anchor, lay it down properly and set it each time, and fewer stern movements on the vessel to make sure it's bedded in. So in that regard, I got reasonably competent at setting that anchor. But more recently, I just did a trip to the Whitsundays, and prior, fortunately, or just for whatever reason, managed to touch base with Paul, or was introduced to Paul, and we were talking about the Active anchors, and we agreed that during that trip, I'd use his Active anchor, which I ultimately did. I anchored half a dozen, eight or so times during that trip in varying conditions. And one remarkable difference I noted with the Active anchor compared to the CQR is that the Active anchor grabbed every time. It was quite incredible how quickly it grabbed. And of course you go into the process of ensuring that it's set with a little bit of a stern movement, but the process was just out of discipline. The point is, the Active anchor grabbed quickly every time. It was quite phenomenal.
And the Active anchor that you have there is a DF600, which is 13 kilos or around 30 pounds. So you replaced that. You replaced a 45 pound or a 20 kilo CQR with that, and it was adequate, you feel?
Oh well, more than adequate. It was impressive. The performance was a marked difference as far as how easy it's set.
And what about reset after a tidal or wind change?
Well, each time we anchor, it was for a nighttime anchorage, and as you know, you might set it in one wind direction or tide direction, and that'll change during the night. And while we're monitoring our vessel's position of the anchor during the night, yes, it reset according to the wind and tide, and it went through the full 180 degrees as you'd expect. And once it had reset, it still grabbed. It's not like it dragged a bit and then set. It grabbed holes straight away in the reset situation. And not only that, but during the night we were keeping an anchor watch and monitoring the boat's movements very clearly or closely. And while the wind changed over the night, as you'd appreciate, and yes, the boat swung around, but once it had reset, or sort of from initial set, and when it reset, it was just like swinging on a fixed arc. It really did hold.
And you monitored that on your GPS, is that correct?
We did.
And what sort of bottom types were you predominantly anchoring on, would you say, Chris?
Mainly sand. When you have a rough idea of what the bottom is, but unless you've got some mud or sand on the anchor, when you bring it up, you can only speculate what the bottom was. But my guess is that it was mostly sand, and in some cases it might have been a mixture of sand and a little bit of mud.
And you mentioned earlier about the how clean the anchor was when it came up compared to others. Could you explain something about how much sediment was attracted to the anchor flukes on retrieval?
Well, the anchor, there was just probably a little bit of sort of, I call it a muddy sad mixture on one or two occasions. The rest of it, in all other times, it came up clean. But importantly, in the times where there was some mud on the anchor, or mud and sand, and I wanted to clean that off before I brought it up on the vessel, I would teabag the anchor as it's coming towards the top, just to get rid of that mud and sand. And the fact that this anchor was so light made that very, very easy for a human to teabag this anchor. It was very good in that regard as well.
And what about, so the period you were using it, as I recall, was on and off for a few months. And did you notice any corrosion or any any inhibition of the mechanism of the anchor at all?
No, I mean it's stainless steel components and galvanised components. I mean, in the time you wouldn't expect that there would be any degradation of those components during that time, but certainly there was no sign of it, which is what I would have expected.
And just run us quickly through your credentials again, one time, Chris, please.
Yeah, spent 30 years in the Navy, firstly as a shipwright and then later on as a marine engineer. And along that journey I got involved in keelboat sailing. And sitting to Hobart, Melbourne to Hobart, and that's neither here nor there as far as anchoring, but towards the end of that, or just soon after getting out of the Navy, I ended up buying my own vessel. It's a 36-foot, 6.5 ton Roberts, and have done quite a few, a couple of Sundays trips and one down to Tasmania in that time, plus a lot of other local trips and weekend trips to here and there.
And would you recommend this anchor to other yacht owners? And if so, for what reason would you recommend it?
Would absolutely recommend it for the reasons I've already stated. The fact it grabs very quickly every time in a sandy, muddy bottom, it just absolutely outperformed the CQR anchor.
And would you say that the holding power to weight ratio is something unusual or good or etc.?
We probably anchored in the biggest wind of 15 knots, might have got up to 20, and there's absolutely no indication that the anchor dragging in those conditions. Under heavier wind loads, hard to tell, but certainly the fact that I can put an anchor down and be comfortable to sleep the night on it at 15 to 20 knots, absolutely happy with that.
So you felt safe with a 13 kilo anchor on a 36-foot yacht of 8 tons approximate?
Yes, I do, absolutely.
Excellent. Well, thanks very much, Chris. I wish you well on your sailing in the future.
Right, thank you very much, Paul. Good luck with it all.
Thank you so much. Bye.